they'll compliment anything, you know? And I think we've actually, I think we've met someone like that where they come up with a compliment, like an offhand compliment, and you'll hear them say it to multiple people. Like every time they meet someone, they just come up with a compliment, and then you realize that they just learned this thing, and they're like, oh, in order to make someone my friend, I must pick something out about them and say, oh, I like this about you. And then they'll say the same thing like multiple times, and you're kind of just like, you've already mentioned this to me, you know? And it's like, if you really did like something, it's like, it's hard. I find it hard to believe that you're experiencing this for the first time again and then making the compliment genuine. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, I know people like that for sure. Where it can come off as too much. And
it
puts you off on this. It's like,
right. Or so like a classic one is, I feel like you see this more with women, but they'll just be like, oh my gosh, nice hair. And then they're just doing it to everybody like, oh my gosh, I love this about you. And it's like, at first, it might seem genuine, but then after a while, they're doing it to you every time. And you're like, dude, relax. I don't know if you notice that, but I notice a lot of women where they like, as soon as they see another girl, like, oh my gosh, like your hair. And then they just go back to like being snobby. I don't know.
Yep. That is a shadow characteristic of most women, I feel like. And they're not even aware of it, honestly. It's like you should try to make a genuine connection with something that feels true to you.
Yeah. No, 100%. It's like, yeah, don't just compliment something random. Like, that's not the purpose of it. The purpose of it is like, if you really do appreciate what someone is doing or something about someone, then yeah, letting them know is awesome, because I feel like we definitely don't do that enough. But when you're like, got a little checkbox, it's been like, oh, meet someone, make sure I compliment something about their body because it'll make them feel better about themselves and they'll be way more likely to be my friend. It's like, that's weird. Like, don't do that, because like I said, the people that do that, they essentially don't even remember that they did that the last time. And then they'll make the same compliment about the same thing. And you're like, it's not even something to be complimented. They'll be like, oh, I love your glasses. And you're like, oh yeah, I've had them for 6 years. They're old and falling apart, but thanks. And then they see you again and they're like, oh, I love your glasses. And you're like, yeah, no, you said that the last time. That, it's like, and then they meet someone else and they're like, oh, I love this. And it's like, dude, you literally love it. Is that like a thing? And you're just like, oh, I must find something I love about them and let them know. Like, that's just weird to me. But that it kind of like, it's interesting to be able to relate to like these repressive or these words that they're using, like these natures. So you can kind of like categorize, like, what exactly does it mean by these different things?
Yeah, I will say that I have personal experience mostly with repressive natures rather than the reactive natures. And what really struck a chord with me when listening to the repressive nature was the cutting oneself off from emotional experience. And so you just like, you no longer want to experience a high or low, so you choose no experience at all. And so it's basically just like no pain, no pleasure type of thing. So you're just like in the middle and you don't really have any expression. And it's like, I can reside there very often because it's just like too much effort for me sometimes, especially in this super stimulating environment, to react in one way. So I'll just be super mellow. And some people can be put off by that, but it's like, honestly, it feels too taxing on my energetic system in order to give an overreactive, excited state all the time. And people be like, oh, what's wrong? And I'm like, I'm fine. I'm just not always in an ecstatic state, I'm just on a baseline mellow, like I'm not high or low, I'm just chilling.
Yeah, no, I think we all go through that for sure. I've definitely been mellowed out sometimes. And it's just like, what's wrong with you? Nothing. And then the reactive nature, I feel like you might see like the repressive and the reactive can almost be like a feminine, masculine type of thing. Obviously we embody both, but the reactive nature, it was saying how a lot of times can like come out as like anger. And a lot of times you'll see that in dudes. But it was essentially saying the reactive nature is like narrow-mindedness and pessimism, and that they essentially won't agree with anybody. And I can't think off the top of my head of anyone like that specifically, but, or no, I guess maybe it's like those people who are always trying to argue with you. Actually, you know what? Come to think of it. Like, I do know
I
somebody.
definitely know a lot of people like that, honestly,
Yeah,
where
yeah,
they're
that
like
makes sense.
unwilling to give in a situation
Mm-hmm.
and they only want to hear their opinion and their opinion validated. And yeah, it says like any sliver of optimism, they just shut down immediately.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we know somebody from back where we used to live that was like that, always negative. And you're like,
Mm-hmm.
dude, not everything we say has to be put into a negative spin. Like, I understand there are positives and negatives to each reality, but the more that you focus on the negative, the more you'll perpetuate that in your life. So, why would you choose to think pessimistically when you can choose to think optimistically? And when someone is presenting an optimistic point of view, the best thing you can do is go with it because it's like a free ride to good thoughts. It's like they're providing already positive energy, so why would you just try to tear them down? It doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the idea of going from pessimism to optimism is essentially just like it's saying it's narrow-mindedness, right? And the ability or this idea that you have to argue with everyone. And yeah, it's like essentially they're not willing to let the idea play out. It's like, you don't have to shut it down, dude. You don't have to accept my idea as truth. It's like, if you ask me too, the only way to look at it is to be optimistic. Like, to be pessimistic about something means that you're really not being grateful for the present moment. When I remember speaking to someone specifically, and I was just trying to tell them about one of the laws of life, one of the Hermetic principles is this idea that the law of rhythm, that everything moves in ups and downs, and that I think it's two things, right? It's the law of rhythm and the
Vibration?
no, I think it is rhythm. Like, everything is swinging back and forth. And so this idea that if things are low for you, then they must inevitably come back up. And I was explaining it to this person and they're like, oh, well, I'm just still waiting on the ups to happen. And it's like, you have a job, you have a home, you have family. What are your downs? You know, it's like, truly, if you really think about it, what could your downs be? Like, yeah, yes, you have downs, but are your downs as down as some other people? No, right? So it's like, I think that, again, going from pessimism to optimism is a matter of being grateful, which you could argue is like almost like I wouldn't say an intelligence test, but you have to have some type of awareness to be like, things aren't that bad. And if things aren't that bad, I mean, how can you perceive the tops of something if you're only looking at the negative, right? It's like, in order to see the highs and lows, you have to first be aware of, I mean, I guess you could even argue there really are no lows, really, if you really think about it, right? Like that idea of there's no such thing as good or bad. And I think we're going to get into that in a little bit with the myths. But if there's no good or bad, right? Highs and lows are only a perspective. So if you can just change your perspective, you can really see the rhythm of life.